I'm 22. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment, which actually looks more like a motel room with a tiny kitchen in it. Despite its small size, I have managed to distribute all my furniture and appliances to give it a very comfy feeling. Next to the entrance door, there is a TV space with a two-person sofa, a red armchair, and a wooden coffee table. Next to this, there's the dining space/kitchen with a table, the stove, a sink, and the fridge. My bed is located by the wall opposite to the entrance door, so I can watch TV while lying down, which is great. Behind the TV, there's a quite large window, one of the ones with several parallel glass panels that are tilted open, with white curtains covering it. My apartment is second in a row of 4 rooms that connect with another row of 4 rooms, forming an L shape. In the middle of this inexpensive compound, there's a space with some trees where some of the neighbors keep their cars and bikes, and everything is enclosed by high walls and a remote-operated electric gate. The rooms are connected by a long porch, lit up at night with fluorescent lights. There is one light in front of every apartment. This light allows me to see through the curtains, like the shape of the tree closest to my room. This made me feel uneasy the first couple of months after moving in. I was sure one night I'd see something scary through the curtains, like Norman Bates behind the shower curtain in Psycho. But all I ever got to see was my neighbors' silhouettes moving around, chasing cats away or just going out for a smoke. The gate and the walls made me feel safer, and I got used to it. I've been living here for 2 years now. One night 3 months ago, I was lying on my bed reading an ebook on my laptop when I heard a whistled tune outside. It was a creepily happy melody, like carousel music, or at least that's what it made me think of. My first thought was that it was my neighbor who smokes a lot, and that he was out there having a cigarette. But that meant that he wasn't really smoking, because the whistling was continuous, unpaused. I'm not the most courageous guy around, so getting up to look outside the window was never an option for me. When something scared me, I always decided to lie down facing the wall and try to fall asleep, which is exactly what I did this time. But the whistling got louder. I could hear it was getting closer to the window. I had shivers running down my spine, and I closed my eyes tightly, hoping it was the lady next door drunk again and trying to find her way into her room. The whistling got even louder now. It was right in front of my room. I turned around slowly away from the wall, and then I saw it. Through the white curtains, I could see the distinctive shape of a man with long hair. He was standing at the window. He didn't move. He was just whistling this horrible tune that made me feel like I was inside of a horror movie. I started sweating. Was this some kind of pervert trying to watch me sleep or something? He stood there for what felt like hours. I'm not sure why, but now it was clear to me that he wasn't one of the neighbors. I wondered if anyone else in the place had heard him. I couldn't turn my eyes away from him. I thought about all the psychos from Scary Stories, and that if I pulled the curtains aside, I would see the most twisted face staring at me. I built up enough courage to mutter the words, "Who's there?" which barely came out of my mouth. No answer. The silhouette just stood there, still whistling. "Who's there?" I asked, now in a more aggressive tone. This is when the shape turned around and started walking slowly towards my front door. Maybe it actually was one of the neighbors, or a creepy guest that was now heading to their room. Then my door handle moved. He was trying to get in. I completely lost it. I grabbed my cell phone, went into the bathroom, and locked myself in. I called the police first, and then the landlord, who lived next door in a house I explained that there was someone trying to break into my apartment. I was sure I'd be dead by the time they came. But it turned out the whistler had given up. The police would get him now. When the police arrived, I told them what had happened, and they searched the entire neighborhood, but they couldn't find anybody. One of the neighbors said that she had seen everything from her room, but did not have a cell phone to call anyone. She said that after trying to get in, the guy, who was wearing saggy clothes and looked homeless, walked nonchalantly towards the perimeter wall and climbed up, jumping over it, and he never stopped whistling. The landlord got electric barbed wire on top of the walls after this. This is pretty common in my country, actually, since it's pretty dangerous everywhere. And I haven't seen anything but that tree through the curtains since then. I still sleep with my face turned towards the wall, but I always think I'll hear that whistling again. A couple of years ago, back when I was in high school, I noticed that I had misplaced my favorite stuffed animal. It was one of those Steiff Teddy Bears, the kind that are made in Germany. My grandma had bought it for me when she was there on vacation, and being of German heritage, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. It was a large brown bear, with dark leather paws and a cute button face. My grandma had also sewn onto the bear a bright turquoise ribbon, with my initials embroidered on the front. This way, I'd never lose the bear, because it would always have my name on it. Little did my grandma know, I can lose anything. Losing things is nothing new for me. It happens all the time. My mom used to make fun of me for all the things I misplace. Countless times growing up, I'd lose my keys or forget my lunch. So when I lost the bear, it was just typical behavior for me. No one thought it odd or strange. What I did find strange, however, was this guy I started noticing on my street. I'd never seen him before, and things just felt a little funny with him. He drove an older Toyota sedan that was pastel blue, and he parked it under a large oak tree down the street from my house every day. I can't remember exactly when I first noticed him, but once I saw him, I couldn't unsee him, if you know what I mean. At first, I just thought the whole thing was kind of odd. There was this random guy sitting in his car for hours at a time. I wondered if he was waiting for someone, or maybe he just really liked our street. But when I started to notice him day after day for a couple weeks, I got a little freaked out, so I started keeping tabs on him. After a while, I just couldn't help but look for him after school. It was like clockwork. Every day at 3:15, he'd be there in his car, waiting for God knows what. One time, I took my dad's binoculars and looked at him from my bedroom window. I could see clearly into his car, and I wondered if he could see into my room. As I watched him, I noticed that he was sitting still, his eyes staring straight ahead. I watched him for a good 10 minutes until he tilted his head up and made eye contact with me. I fell back onto my bed and shivered. It felt like he was staring right through me. That's when my sixth sense started to kick in. It was subtle at first, but slowly grew bigger and bigger, to the point where I couldn't sleep. I was afraid that if I looked out that window at night, I'd see that guy sitting in his car. That sick feeling stayed with me. I told my mom about it. I told her how he sat in his car every day at the same time, and how I felt sick and uneasy about it. Then my mom asked me what color the car was, and I told her. She didn't say anything, but her face turned white. My mom called the cops. We watched his arrest happen from my window. When the cops took him out of the driver's seat, he had a smile on his face. I had goosebumps up and down my spine. Later that night, we were watching the news, and a report came on about a man that had been arrested, and it was that guy from our street. The reporter said the man was a convicted rapist that preyed on younger girls. My mom and I looked at each other, a mutual expression of terror. They showed some items recovered from his car. It was full of things he'd collected from his victims. According to the report, he would stalk a girl for several months, stealing some of her things, and then eventually he'd break into her house, and you can guess the rest. The camera panned over a number of his collectibles. He had pictures and books and girls' clothes. I felt uneasy. The camera panned a little farther down the table, and that's when my mom stood up. "Isn't that your teddy bear?" she yelled. My throat went dry. My palms became sweaty. Sitting on the table was a Steiff Teddy Bear with a turquoise ribbon. I was on my way back to my college campus the Sunday night after the 4th of July. I had driven through the roads along the swampy marshes of southern Louisiana just to get to my folks' house, and I was regretting it now. My mom had convinced me to stay for one last Sunday supper. Now I would have to drive all night if I wanted to make it to class Monday morning. I didn't really like driving on the back roads next to the bayou. The way the trees rise out of the dark water on either side of the road creeps me out. They're really thick in some places too, and sometimes when I drive by them, my mind plays tricks on me. Like I might see a dark shape, and if I stare at it long enough, it might look like it's darting between the trees, following my car. I always get psyched out when the only light comes from my headlights, so I turn on the radio to get my mind off of things. It really provides a distraction from the looming trees and the overwhelming sense of dread that always comes over me. So on this particular evening, it was 11:30 at night, and almost pitch black outside. Except for the moon high in the sky, casting its silvery beams on the road, I was doomed to darkness. I started driving down a dirt road, with a tree-heavy bayou on the left, and thick 10-foot-high underbrush on the right. Much to my dismay, the radio started cracking and making static noises. "No, damn it," I whispered, turning a few knobs. I really didn't need this right now. The static got louder and louder, until there was no trace of music, and it was just blaring static. Sighing in dismay, I turned back to the road just in time to see a dark figure appear in my headlights, before I hit it head-on. I screamed and swerved to the left, feeling the front, then back tires travel over whatever I had hit. I swerved to the right again and slammed on the brakes, coming to a dusty stop in the middle of the road. I punched the wheel in frustration and hung my head in my hands. I had just hit someone. I could kiss college and the rest of my life goodbye. Gulping, I got out of the car and left the door open. Peering out onto the moonlit road, I saw a dark, crumpled figure lying about 30 feet away. It wasn't moving. The warmth of the summer night, muggy and hot, washed over me. It didn't feel pleasant at all. Mosquitoes and flies were buzzing everywhere. I had to swat them off as I looked down the road at the body. "Fuck," I whispered, jogging down the road. Sir, are you all right?" I was sure they weren't all right at all. I reached them and got down on one knee. They were lying face down. I rolled them over and stepped back in shock. It was a dummy. A padded dummy dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. The impact with my car had ripped open its chest, causing stuffing to spill onto the road. "What the fuck?" I whispered. Feeling more scared than ever, I looked up, eyeing the tall bushes ahead of me and the dark bayou behind me. There was no logical explanation of a dummy being out on a deserted back road like this. Before I could ponder this further, A sudden breeze picked up, rustling the bushes. I heard a low moaning circling around me. I looked in all directions, but saw nothing. Suddenly, a loud scream came from somewhere behind me. It was a pure cry of terror and desperation. I screamed myself and turned to look down the road a bit. There, in between the bushes, a red face stared. A bright light, probably from a flashlight, came from the right of the face. It was pointed at my eyes, and I had to put my hands up to see the face in the bushes. It was the face of a young woman. A large cut was on her forehead, causing crimson to run down her face, until only bright eyes stared at me from behind a mask of blood. The girl opened her mouth and screamed again. I still couldn't see who was holding the flashlight because the light was blinding me. I screamed and started to run back towards my car, but to my horror, I saw one black-gloved hand close the door from the inside. The car started, and then it roared off down the road, sending up clouds of dust as it went, until it was out of sight. I turned back to the bushes where I had seen the face. There was now a body lying in the road. I rushed over to it. It was a young woman, about 20. The large cut on her forehead had plastered her hair to her face with blood. Her throat had been violently slashed, staining the road red. Her body, dressed only in a t-shirt and underwear, was covered in burn marks and scratches. Her fingernails had been pried off, and someone had cut her Achilles tendons. I moaned and stumbled back to the road. That's when the giggling started. Over the moaning wind, a high, childlike giggle swept over the dark bushes and trees. But it wasn't a child. It was obviously an adult, trying and failing to sound like one. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I turned away from the body and ran. I ran down the road, eyes flitting from left to right, looking for movement of any kind. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. I had to get away from here as soon as possible. I didn't want to end up like that poor girl in the road. The giggling grew fainter and fainter, until it couldn't be heard anymore. 5 minutes of running later, I arrived at T Junction. An old sign pointed north, towards Church Point. The one to the right pointed towards Baton Rouge, which was near my college. I turned onto this road, and was greeted by the sudden sound of chanting. I looked off to the left, and saw a small glade in between the trees. I squinted my eyes and walked closer. Some people were standing around a fire, tossing things into a pot, suspended over the flames. They were all wearing some kind of deer mask, made out of sticks and twine. They began dancing around the fire in erratic, twirling movements. One, much taller than the others, stood back, holding a large book. He was wearing nothing except what appeared to be a goat mask. He began reading in a deep, booming voice.
"All hail our devil.
All hail our devil," the dancers repeated as they continued their strange ritual.
He sees the blood we spill for his favor, and he is good.
The dancers repeated this as well.
He is one. He is power.
At this, the dancers stopped dancing and circled around a man.
All hail the Lord of the Flies.
The hooded figures cheered at this.
Now, let us consume his flesh.
They lunged at the man, stabbing him over and over while I stood back, horrified. Then they shoved the man to the ground and jumped on him, covering him so I couldn't see, laughing crazily the whole time. I heard a sound that might have been tearing flesh. I stumbled back in disbelief and turned back to the road, only to see a small figure about 10 feet away. It was a little girl, about 10, wearing a black robe but no mask. Her hair was very light blonde, almost white. She cocked her head, smiling at me, but there was no joy or happiness. She lifted one arm, pointed a finger at me, and began to laugh. It was a high, thin, terrifying sound. Out from the trees behind her stepped about 20 other people, all dressed in black robes and stick deer masks. All at once, the masked figures began running towards me. I screamed and turned the other way, towards the swamp. It was my only way out. I jumped into the swamp. The gritty water was only about 2 feet deep. I could hear angry shouts from behind me, and more sounds of feet hitting the water. I felt something whiz past my ear. I watched a dagger hit the water ahead of me and sink into the darkness. They chased me around the swamp forever. Every time I thought I was safe, I would see another one. In the end, I sat in a spot behind a tree where the water was up to my neck. I closed my eyes and prayed. I heard splashing and angry shouts for about another 2 hours, until I couldn't hear anything. I still waited until the sun was high in the sky before I got up and began trying to find my way out of the swamp. 3 hours of splashing, tripping, and guessing later, I found a dirt road and began following it. Almost collapsing with exhaustion, I eventually reached a small gas station and shambled through the door. I must have been quite a sight, sopping wet, covered in scratches, bruises, and blood. After quickly explaining to the horrified clerk that I needed help, I used the phone to call the police. They seemed skeptical at first, but they agreed to send a squad car out to the location I described. I then called my mom, asking her to come pick me up. The police never found my car, but they did find the girl's body on the road, and immediately called a search party to comb through the swamp. I found out later that they found several bodies in that swamp, weighed down with rocks, some in late stages of decomposition. They found 2 fresh bodies, the girl in the road and another deep in the woods. As for me, whenever I visit my parents, I take an alternate route along the interstate. It may not be as fast, but I prefer it much more than the dark, twisted back roads of the swamps, where hooded figures run between the trees. Let me start off by setting the stage for this encounter that happened a few years back. It was Christmas night, and I worked at a decent-sized factory as a security guard for the night shift. The factory was built in 1900 and is located at the end of a residential suburban street, which was common for the time. Because it was Christmas night, all other employees and guards were home for the holidays. As I sat in the security office, which is detached from the main building next to Gate 1. Around 2 a.m., I look up from the computer monitor to see 3 girls on the younger side, maybe 12 or 13, about 20 yards away, standing at the telephone pole, staring directly at me. It's not uncommon to see children in the area, as it's a neighborhood, but 2 a.m. on Christmas night? Come on. I tried to ignore them and continued to look down at the monitor, until only about 20 seconds later, I look up startled, hearing tapping on the locked office door, and you guessed it, it was the girls. A confused and nervous look painted on my face, I'm sure, as the girls started laughing. "Can I help you?" They stood there with an evil grin on their pale faces. "Let us in," they said. Their eyes were black. At this point, I was speechless. My heart just sank at realizing how creepy this situation was. I told them to go away with a stern voice. As soon as I sat down, they were back where they had started, by the telephone pole, looking at me with emotionless faces. And just like that, they were gone. I watched the cameras for hours, waiting to see if they showed up again. As you could imagine, I didn't leave the guardhouse until morning. They might have only been young girls, but something about them was not right. So little girls with the black eyes, let's not meet again. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. If you want me to tell your story or read a creepypasta, email me at the address in the description. And now it's time for interview with my 3-year-old nephew. Okay, ready? Look at me. What? Hi, sir. What's your name?
Pink.
Bane. Bane what? What's your last name? How old are you?
3.
What? Do you know your birthday?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's just Jason's birthday.
Look right here.
What?
Just put your face this way, okay? Because you're talking into there, the microphone.
You can't talk in there.
You can't?
Why is that?
Oh,
Why is the microphone in there?
it's right there. You see it?
Oh,
What's my name?
as a turn.
And what's her name?
She's Alex.
What about this? What's her name?
She's Whippy.
What is it? Let me see. Look this way. What's her name?
She's the doggy.
And what's her name?
She's my mama.
No, the dog.
No.
Did you just eat?
Yeah.
Was it good?
Yeah.
What'd you have?
You have Jason have pancakes.
Yeah.
We have pancakes.
Do you think my YouTube videos are cool?
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie?
It's like my movie.
Your movie?
Yeah. Help me talk a board in there. In the hole. Why me talk in there?
Because we're recording it and I'm gonna put it on TV.
Oh.
You be famous. Kind of. What's your favorite cartoon?
So we do.
Nice. And who's in that?
It's just Dopey Deuce and the TV.
When's the last time you pooped your pants?
I thought.
You don't? Where do you go to the bathroom?
You don't poop in like a bathroom.
In the bathroom?
Yeah. People still in the bathroom.
Yeah. Do you like to go swimming?
Yeah. You went a beach.
You went to the beach?
Yeah.
Cool. You miss Ripley when she's not there?
No. She's not there. How you close this?
You go.
Oh. At the tree and there die.
Nice.
So dairy. I love you.
I love you too. Hey,
What?
are we gonna do pumpkins on Halloween?
Yeah. Do I have pumpkins?
Yeah?
Bye, auditory. Bye, Whoopi. Whoopi, Whoopi.
Come right up here. Okay, ready? Say thanks for watching
Thanks for watching
The Devil's Interval.
Double Nibble.
Bye.
Bye.
Be good to animals, even people. See ya.
Ja, snämar, bärksbes, hrish.
What? Is there a bug? Those motherfuckers. Those piece of shits. Ah, poops.
Wait a minute. Can I set this shit down somewhere? Because this thing's stabbing me in the ass.
I'm good. That's on there.